audio fine, but now I'm recording video, and we should be good to go. But no worries about any of that. Ben, you are from Orlando, which is fantastic because that's a 2 hour drive, hop skipping away from where we're at here in Jacksonville, Florida. I've been to Orlando plenty of times. Our homeboy Walt, one of the co-founders and original members of the show, lives down there, so I'm there like every year. But I'm curious from a different perspective. How is the comic book scene down in Orlando, in your words?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I mean, if you're just talking about purely from a reader and collector standpoint, um, it's okay. I haven't lived in too many cities that had a burgeoning comic scene, but we have a number of really good shops here.
Hmm.
I have an LCS that I can walk to, which is amazing. It's a great shop. Um, for creators, from a creator standpoint, there's very few indie creators in Orlando that I've found, and
Hmm.
I've done some good searches. I've actually met up with a couple it face to face, which has been great. Um, there's a couple of pretty uh, indie famous, I guess I could say, creators on the East Coast, with my boy Travis Gibb and Jonathan Hendricks. So they both
Hmm.
do a lot of Kickstarters, and they have books that most indie folks would recognize. Um, at some point, I'm going to try to meet up with them face to face, and just try to get to know more people in the local indie scene. But like I don't know, like I couldn't compare it to someplace like New York where Travis is located. So I don't know. Maybe Travis could answer that question better than I could. But I think it's okay. But there could be a lot more indie folks around.
Got it. Got it. I mean, Travis, you're in the the mecca of definitely a mecca of a lot of things, hip hop, and I definitely would think comics as well. But what is your preferred comic shop, and what's the comic book scene in your kind of area?
Yeah, well, like Ben, I have a comic shop that's a couple blocks away that is really nice. They have the classic, you know, the the grumpy guy works at the counter, and then like the kind of younger, more personable person. It's kind of like good cop, bad cop. It's a perfect place. I love it. And I've actually met a couple creators there, randomly, like when I took one of my first comics to try to sell it to the shop to get them to put it in the indie book section. There was another guy that was just kind of browsing, and he was like, "Oh, I'm a creator too." So I mean, like you said,
There are a dime a dozen out there, huh?
unlike some cities, there's a lot of people that work in comics here. It is somewhat intimidating because of that, though. Like, I can't just go up and call like James the Fourth, who lives in Brooklyn, uh, and be like, "Hey, we both like comics. Let's hang out." I mean, so there is that.
Travis? What's the name of
But
the
yeah, I've
shop?
been able to build a small. It's called JHU Comics. It's Jim Hanley's Universe.
Hmm.
It's a classic place. And then I'll go to Midtown or Forbidden Planet sometimes.
The classics, man. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many good comic shops in New York, like right next to each other, right around the corner, like within plenty of walking distance. Yeah, you got plenty of options.
Yeah, it was really nice. A couple months ago, before we had the anthology come out, or even the Kickstarter come out, I was able to bring an indie book that I wrote to Forbidden Planet and got them to put it on a shelf, and that was really awesome. Uh, it's just kind of a community that people are willing to embrace, and I guess I answered that last bit a little fucked up. Sorry,
Hey, you just got the
but
point across even more. Well,
Yeah,
since you
yeah,
bring up,
I will say one thing about the Orlando scene. So I've been to four different shops to ask about stocking our book when it gets printed, which should be in a month. And three of them were very receptive to it. They were like, "Yeah, we'll take some. Like, I'll take three
oh,
orders, or I'll
cool.
take four." And I was surprised by that. I was like Travis was saying, I thought there was going to be grumpy comic shop owner who was like, "No, I don't want an indie book. Like, get out of here." But
Hmm.
they were like really cool about it. So as soon as we get some printed, I'm gonna drive them to those shops, and yeah, they'll be on the shelf. It'll be great.
Yeah, and I mean, Ben, you've got, I feel like with the amount of comic conventions, the big ones like MegaCon, and then some of the indie ones. I feel like you've got great vehicles to get your books out, and in Orlando's got a bunch of really good chain comic shops too. Is what I'll say. I've never seen so many successful comic shops in one city than outside of New York. But Orlando's got chains of comic shops. Coliseum is there. I think
Yep.
a comic shop. Don't they have multiple locations? Yeah. So
I,
yeah, you got
I
a
think they
lot of
do.
great
Yeah.
options.
Yeah, a comic shop used to be my old LCS when I lived on that side of town, but now Coliseum of Comics is the one I was referring to that I can walk to. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, and they're
Awesome.
one of the ones that
And
agreed. Go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say Coliseum of Comics is one of the ones I was saying that would stock the book.
Cool. No, that look, if there's any shop you want to get your book out to a lot of people and potential customers, it's definitely gonna be at Coliseum. But Ben, I'm sorry, Travis, you had brought up the Kickstarter, and I wanted to congratulate the both of you as well as the rest of the comics writing class. Congrats on the success of the Kickstarter. You guys have raised almost double what you originally asked for. There will still be 3 days left by the time this episode airs. How are you guys feeling about the accomplishment and whatnot so far?
Well, can I just plug Ben because Ben has been instrumental as an editor, but also as doing a lot of the marketing and kind of the outreach. So thank you, Ben, and all the editors for doing an incredible job.
That's awesome.
It's really something that I never expected to kind of take off in the way it did, and it's a humbling experience to be part of this project. So thanks, Ben.
Oh,
That's
thank
cool.
you for
Ben,
saying
do
so.
you have a? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying thank you for saying so. But all credit to the writers, Travis, and to the other editors. We have an editorial team. I'm not the only editor, and everybody's been helping to shoulder the burden of getting this out there.
Hmm.
This is my first Kickstarter. I had no idea how much work it would take to
Hmm.
get one of these off the ground and get it fulfilled. It's a huge amount of work, and like it's key to have a good team helping you with the marketing, right? Because you're turning yourself into a little publishing startup and a marketing organization,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a tremendous amount of work. So yeah, if you do one of these, you really want to have like some folks on your team who can help out a lot. So there's been many hands who have led to the success of it, and like all credit to everybody involved.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've interviewed quite a few folks that have been successful in launching a Kickstarter and getting a project off the ground and fully funded, but I can't recall the last time that they've had a team. So the sorry, the level of difficulty is what stands out when I think of like Kickstarter, because it's primarily done by like a very usually one individual, one creator, maybe a writer and artist with them. But it sounds like you were fortunate enough to have like a community and literally like a whole class, supporting you and getting this
Yeah, I mean,
project like fulfilled.
what's kind of interesting about it, I'm sure Ben would agree, is that through this Discord group that we created in Scott's class, we almost kind of made a publishing company in a weird way. We have
Hmm.
all these writers that are, talking every week and kind of catching up on, where they are with their writing, where they are in their lives, where they are in, where their dreams are, what they want to do. And then it's just nice to be able to kind of come together almost in like this shared goal, like a I don't know, like a Image Comics or something. It's just you're all creators, you're all wanting to do the same thing, and you're working as hard as you can to make that happen. And it's that collective goal that I really think kind of came through in this project. And the Kickstarter showed we made a ton of money.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, yeah. You guys, yeah, like I said, you guys doubled, met doubled that amount, which is always a good thing when you can just at least hit your target, but to double the amount and still have days left over, I think is a great sign.
Yeah, so to be completely honest with you, when right before we launched, the editors were talking, we have like a private editor channel. We thought if we just made a couple $1,000, in our first week, we'd be very happy. So we did not know like what was going to happen, and we fulfilled the original campaign goal in 3 days, which was like mind blowing. What a ride that was! And then we're working on stretch goal three, a couple $100 away from that. you know,
Cool.
when we came up with that number of 13.5, we were like, probably not going to hit that. Like, yeah, that's really going to be like far out there. So it's been very surprising how supportive the indie community has been. Everybody's friends and family, obviously, you want to tap those networks.
Yep.
So it's been a wild ride. I don't know if I would ever do another Kickstarter again. That's not exactly like where my head's at, but it's been interesting process, and we're very happy like with how successful it's been.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I want to get to talking about the anthology, Tales from the Cloakroom, as well as dive into the lessons and what it was like getting trained and taught by Scott Snyder on writing comics and creating comics. But first, I want to know a little bit more about you guys and your comic book, origin and experience. Right, every great comic book character has got a great origin. I want to know from both of you, and Travis, if you want to lead us off. What's your earliest memory about comics? Like, were they in your home growing up? Like, how did you fall in love with the medium?
Yeah, well, I've always been a Wednesday warrior. I've been collecting comics since I was quite young. Definitely, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. And guess my earliest memory might be something like a Garfield or like a Tintin. Not anything that was,
Hmm.
like the big two, but kind of something that like maybe my mom bought and was like, oh, maybe this will get him to like reading more, something like that. Um, Definitely, have all the old Tintins and like Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that. But then when I was maybe like 12 or 11 or something, like started getting way into superhero comics and never looked back. I've been collecting, since I don't know. I have a bunch of boxes, is what I will say.
Yeah, I feel you on the Sunday papers. Like, they were my aside from like video games and especially like comic book themed video games and Super Nintendo games. Sunday comics were like another good jumping board or springboard into like getting into comic books full time. Because I used to like grab the Sunday funnies from my dad's like newspaper. They were the only thing I cared about, right? Like, of course, right. And then from there, I got into his collection and whatnot. So I feel you on the Sunday papers.
Yeah,
Ben.
and I never thought I would write comics per se.
Hmm.
I always kind of wanted to make films or do something more, even write like books or something. Comics were just something that I loved so much. It kind of was this like sacred thing that I didn't want to like, go into that world because it was just so like something that was just for me. But yeah, this class really kind of gave me the bug, and now I can't stop writing comics.
That's awesome.
That sounds like a
It's
good
like,
bug to have. Ben, same question to you, man. How did your comic book origin and love for the medium start?
Yeah, so Travis, I'm actually glad you said what you're talking about with like Garfield, Calvin, and Hobbes. I had totally forgotten about this, but when I was really young, like maybe 6 or 7, we had Garfield collected books and Calvin and Hobbes books in the house because my dad was a big fan, and I hadn't thought about that in a long time in the context of like my comic origin story. But those are probably the first comics I ever read were like those collected books. And like you guys, I read a lot of Sunday funnies. That's the first section I would grab out of the Orlando Sentinel. um, but as far as like floppies, like pamphlet comic books, um, my dad would take me to the mall when I was a kid, Winter Park Mall here in Orlando, RIP. And I would go hit the arcade, play some video games, and then right next door there was a newsstand, and they had two spinner racks, one for DC, one for Marvel. So those are the first real comics that I got my hands on and would flip through. And my dad would buy me a couple issues at the end of those outings. So I would go home with a couple X-Men titles. I started picking up Transformers and GI Joe. The occasional like Batman or Iron Man, and that's kind of how I got into it. And just from there, I just kept reading. So I've always read comics. These days now I mostly like trade paperbacks and collected editions, but I do read the occasional single issues. And yeah, that's basically it. I even spent a summer working in a comic shop, a long time ago when I was a teenager. I didn't even
Hmm.
get paid. I just did it for free and for books. Like
Uh,
the guy who
Same.
I was working
I
with.
got Yeah, I got
Same.
store credit. I worked like 2 years just straight store credit. They couldn't pay a bill with that, those
Nope.
hours. But I never. My pull box was always empty.
Oh man, amazing, amazing. Yeah, I got like $30 in store credit like a month or something like that. Like you can get, like 20 something issues. And that summer was the summer I found like Akira and some of the other more more like
Nice.
Mm.
mature titles that have really influenced my
Mm.
writing nowadays. But yeah, there's nothing like working in a shop for a little while, like just speaking comics all day and reading and nerding out and eating pizza. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a time I wish I could go back to at this point in my life. I would love to go back to those summers.
I
Travis,
remember it
how did
fondly.
you get? Yeah, Travis, how did you get into the Scott Snyder's writing comic class? Like, what was the process from your end, and then we'll hear from Ben.
Yeah, so my process for getting into Scott's class was I literally saw him do an Instagram post and it just seemed too good to be true. It was like, oh, I'm doing this class on Substack. I didn't even know what Substack was at the time, and it was like this $7 a month, and you join it. I'll teach comic writing, and I'd heard and I'd known that he had done a class at Sarah Lawrence
Hmm.
College, which is a pretty prestigious university in New York, and that's actually where he taught James the Fourth. So I was like, geez, if I could be in a writing class with this guy, I mean, and he's only charging $7, that's insane. So, I
Wow.
took some screenwriting classes in college, and those were amazing. Those are probably some of my favorite classes that I had, just learning about structure and, how to format stuff. And at the end of the day, it does get fairly technical. So I thought that Scott, he knows. I mean, he's the guy who knows. He wrote
For sure.
Court of Owls, a lot of, a lot of great stuff.
And real quick, when you say
So
real quick, when you say James the Fourth, are you talking about James Tinian the Fourth?
yeah, James
Okay.
Tinian literally went to college, and that's how he like got his in, was like he was one of Scott's students.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I don't think anybody in our class is being like, oh, I'm gonna be the next James the Fourth, but even just to have the same knowledge base, to get taught the same lessons, to learn, what Scott could give. I
Yeah.
mean, I not having to spend a whole college, tuition on that. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
I like the way I like the way you put that. When you you know, I think I know personally speaking, my initial reaction to Substack was another streaming platform, another monthly bill. But then then you're talking about Scott Snyder teaching you to write comic books for the price of I don't know a very cheap McDonald's meal once a month, or for $7 a month. And when you consider what he could be charging, especially to take those same classes at say like a university or something, that is a hell of a cost savings that makes me appreciate Substack and what it can offer and what creators can do with it a lot more, a lot more. Ben, what about you, man? How did you come across the class, and what was your process like?
Yeah, so I had signed up for Comixology a year or two ago, and I had read Court of Owls, like the Court of Owls arc,
Hmm.
which is my first exposure to any of Scott's work. Back then I wasn't a big Marvel DC reader. I mostly read indie stuff and a lot of graphic novels. So, but because it's free on Comixology, I was like, let me try this Batman arc. Looks cool, and it was, it's awesome. And then so I started following Scott on socials. I saw that he posted on probably Instagram that he was doing a one-shot comics seminar online via Zoom. And it was sponsored or hosted by the Women in Comics Collective, but anybody could sign up for it. And it was like $25. I was like, okay, like I just read this guy, his stuff's amazing. $25, I'm in. So I watched it. It's fantastic. I learned a ton in that 2 hours. And then very shortly after that, he announced that he was doing the Substack class. It was an even better value, right? It was like $75 for a year for a dozen plus classes. Oh, wow. Yeah, so like you guys, I had never heard of Substack. I didn't know what it was, but I was very interested in the class, and so it was easy for me to jump into it and just to try it out, just to see what it was like, and it's been pretty incredible. Yeah, so that's basically it. That's how I got into it, and It's been a great value. It's been a great ride.
And for anyone tuning in that might not be familiar with the name Scott Snyder, he is a, I guess no pun intended at this point, a master level comic book writer that was really like earned a lot of, I guess became a household name, I think it's safe to say, when he took over Batman when the New 52 series launched. What was that, like 2000, I don't know, 14, 15, whenever New 52 launched and Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo took over the Batman series and his Court of Owls story arc first hit. I mean, like, it just blew his name into like the stratosphere when it came to comic book writers. But he did a lot of great work at DC. I know he wrote the Swamp Thing series for a bit. He also had the Batman, the Black Mirror story arc that he did, I think, in Detective Comics with the artist Jock, which was like really noir, a gritty, like kind of like detective story that I know put him on the map for me. But he's gone on to do, a lot of creator-owned stuff from like The Wake. He wrote the Witches series for Image Comics. He also teamed up, I think, Jeff Lemire for AD After Death. But really, the list goes on. I think recently, or the last thing he did for DC Comics was like a Justice League series with artist Jorge Jimenez. But if there's anyone that you want to be taught, how to succeed and write comics, Scott Snyder is among the very top of those names. And Travis, to your point, I like that you brought up, because I didn't know that about James Tynion. Maybe I did, and maybe I forgot. But they say like you really become a master at something when not only do you succeed, but you can teach someone to like do the same thing. Like that's when you've become a master. So it's like it's only more evidence to Scott Snyder's ability, right? He has found success in doing what he does, and he was able to teach someone. And James Tynion's name is also up there as for very popular and successful comic book writer. So all good stuff to know. Ben, I'm gonna go to you for this one. Can you describe like what a typical day in class was like, and what like the general assignments or lesson plan was like? Like, was it your typical 1 year class, or how what was the time like and all that?
Yeah, sure. So the class, the way it works is you sign up for the Substack, so you start getting 2 posts a week, and it's Scott talking about some aspect of creating comics, right? There's a lot of marketing stuff in there too, but he'll talk about, like characterization or the writer's mindset or villains, all very cool stuff. And then once you're in the class, there's a class Discord, which is like a online learning environment where we all have access to, and there's hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 plus students in there. And then Scott teaches online live once a month. So, usually middle of the month, Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. He'll be on like 2.5 hours, and it'll be a Zoom call that everybody can dial into. It's recorded if you can't make it, so you can watch it the next day. And so, you have access to all those resources. And then he's done a lot of stuff where he will drop a Dropbox links with some resources that you can review and read and follow along for the class. So, like the first class, he had the Court of Owls pitch and script, right? And then
cool. So like behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, from like 10 years ago, it was a Word document. It was like an old Word document. He's like, here's the pitch, here's my original outline, my ideas, and he kind of walked through the whole thing, and then he's like, this is the script, this is what it looked like initially, and then he showed the actual book. And then he'll in those drop boxes he'll often have like a whole comic, or maybe like a couple of scenes from a comic as a PDF. So you've got all those resources that you can like look at if you want, like during the class. um, and then during the class he'll actually pull up a book on comicsology, and he'll do like breakdowns, of certain scenes, depending on what we're learning, like if it's characterization or emotional storytelling. So he'll just go through the scene
Hmm.
like panel by panel, and he'll actually like read some of the dialogue and say, this is what's going on in this panel right here. So it gets pretty detailed, and if you're like a real process nerd about comics, then it would be right up your alley. Like people who are into like scripts and things like that, they would like eat this stuff up.
Yeah, I'm already like I'm already like drooling. I'm like, ooh, tell me about this pitch document.
Oh man,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
yeah, I love like I love my, and that's why I kind of gravitate towards like hardcovers now when it comes to like my collection, because it always, especially if it has that bonus stuff, right? Like the original script, rough sketches and stuff like that. Because I love enjoying the story for what it is, but I also like kind of seeing how it's made, right? Like going kind of behind the scenes and seeing how two creatives from different skill sets, like a writer and an artist, like combine together to create this product. So yeah, that sounds like some really cool stuff that you guys were privy to.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
pretty awesome.
mean, speaking
Go ahead,
of,
Travis.
Yeah, Travis.
I was just going to say, just, speaking of writer and artist collaboration, he brought on Greg Capullo, or sorry, he brought on Greg Capullo, which
Wow.
was awesome. And they had a 2 hour discussion about how they collaborate. And that was probably one of the most valuable classes because, we learn how to write, we learn about villains, we learn about, um, whatever it is, but learning how to deal with another person when you may or may not have the same ideas, or
Hmm.
you just want to kind of be able to express yourself and learn how the other person wants to have information communicated to them. That I thought was a really great class. I mean, every one of the classes were so good. Each one had a theme, so there was a whole class on intros, there was a whole class on villains, there was a whole class on um, you know Will Dennis, the incredible editor who has edited
Hmm.
all your favorite titles. He did a whole class on editing and pitching. So it was really something that you wouldn't even get in a college necessarily, because you're not going to have like these guest lecturers every
Hmm.
time, and things like that. It was something that I know I'll always remember, not just for the class, but also for the people that I met on Discord. As Ben was saying, I would almost pay the $7 a month just to be part of that community. I don't know if you're going to ask about that, but that community is incredible, and you can find, as a comic creator, you could find collaborators, you could find a letterer, you could find an artist, you could find, like us, we found a whole group of people and made a whole subgroup on Discord, and we got together, we started hanging out every week, and you know
Y-
every eventually it came to making an anthology. It was pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
I was gonna say like even if worst case scenario, you just like didn't get which would be impossible, right? It'd be impossible not to get something out of the classes and reference material that he's given you, but like at the very least, it's like you are among peers and colleagues and people with similar interests and goals, right? Like the goal is to learn how to make comic books and get really good at it. Like to be in a room with like imagine being in a physical room with like 1,000 people with that was similar goals. Like you'd leave with some sort of contacts or connections or networking or new friends, right? Like yeah, I found yeah, I feel you, Travis. I feel like just for the $7 alone, that would be worth it to, once again, kind of be in a school setting. Travis, me and you talked about like friendships at this age in life, right? Like 30 plus, like making sorry, making friendships as you get older is challenging when compared to something like being in college or school because you're in a communal space. you're working on things together. There's like a shared interest. So it's that's always been the joy. I'm sorry, the one of my favorite parts of like going to learning, right? Just kind of like learning with others and networking and getting better with other people. And it sounds like you guys got that experience in fold, tenfold, right? Like Ben, you and Travis. I think when we hopped on, you guys were like, "Hey, nice to meet you," and I'm like, "Whoa, you guys have just went through a class together, and you're meeting each other for the first time, but you guys have like a familiarity to each other. Like, was that kind of your experience too, Ben? Just kind of like networking and making like quote unquote lasting friendships and things like that."
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, everything we talked about with the class itself and the resources, all that stuff is amazing. That's worth the $7 in itself. But really, the value, like Travis was saying, is in the community on the Discord and the networking and the relationships that you're making, right? Because like I said, there's probably 1,000 students signed up. You can find any other type of artists that you're looking for if you want to make a comic and collaborate, which we've proven with the anthology. And what we've done is we've spun off a second Discord for the anthology group. So now we have basically a side writers group with 20 something creators in it.
That's cool.
And that group will like live on past the anthology. So what we do is like we're all like pitching. We are writing new scripts that are not related to the anthology. So we share it in the Discord and we're like, hey, can you check out my new script? Tell me like what I need to work on. So that writers group is like incredibly powerful. Considering like the cost, the value for it. So yeah, I think that's where the best value has been, and the education of having to bootstrap like a self-published book, that has been incredibly valuable. Like none of us have tried to publish a book before or market it and get it sold. So, that education has been like school of hard knocks, but it's been like really valuable. So yeah, agreed on all that stuff about
and
the
has
community.
And has Snyder been like very like accessible, like with those type of questions when you come across those hurdles or challenges? Like, can you reach out to him and pick his brain about certain things when it comes to like the marketing or the publishing side?
Yes and no. I would say that he's accessible on the Discord. Every once in a while, he'll pop in and kind of be like, "Hey guys, if you have any questions, let
Got it.
me know. I'll do a like a question and answer next week." So he'll do that kind of thing, and then his assistant, this guy named Tyler Jennis, I believe I'm pronouncing that correct, is kind of been one of our point people for dealing with more of the kind of day to day, like,
Got it.
we need to talk about how Scott's gonna do these signatures for autographs, stuff like that.
Got it. So you're not able to. So it's not like you're not texting Scott like some silly question like, "Hey, what type of paper should I print on? What's the paper weight? What paper quality? Stuff like that." I got you. That's
No,
fair
I
enough.
mean some people definitely will ask like kind of really specific questions, and once a month or once every couple months he'll try to get through like a couple hundred questions, and
Damn.
he'll go down this list and do a YouTube, and just it'll be only for the subscribers, and you can ask him a question, and he usually gets to them. I asked one like one of the first months of this, and he got to mine. I mean, it's just you just gotta sign up, and he's not going to be on your like close contacts list, but it's a resource that you can use, and he's
Got it.
not like totally MIA at all.
Okay. Ben, I'm gonna go to you for this question. What are some words that come to mind when you think of Scott Snyder as a teacher or a writer?
As a teacher, he's incredibly generous. That's the first word that comes to mind. Like you were saying earlier, all the books and projects he's been involved with. Obviously, his time is stretched thin. Like I can't imagine what his bandwidth is like. He's got 3 kids, 8 books on comicsology, 4 that are coming out this week. He's got another book coming out on IDW this week.
Oh
Um,
wow,
he ran the Witches Writers Room because they're pitching a TV show
that's
during the
right.
class. Yeah, that was mid class. He was doing that during the day, and then all of the other books with Image and wherever else he's working on. I can't even imagine how stretched thin he is with all these different projects, and he still took the time to teach a class, for $7 a head, and to work with people who have never published before for the most part. Like a lot of folks, maybe they have never written a script before,
Hmm.
and that to me is like, wow, like that guy must really love teaching and he loves his students
Yeah, he's
because
got to have a lot of patience
he
for
doesn't
sure.
need
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
that, man. Like he doesn't need to do that. Like he's probably like, New York Times bestseller, like just killing it, but he's still taking the time to teach a class. So that's what I think about with
Hmm.
um, his teaching. As far as the word that I think about for his writing, especially his recent stuff, he keeps using this word like in his newsletters, but he's really awesome at like the big bombastic sort of like epic, right? An adventure or sci-fi epic like Noctera.
Yeah.
He frequently uses the word bombastic, and I think he's become that guy where he's like the summer blockbuster comic writer, where he'll write some kind of like crazy sci-fi epic, and it's just like whoa, like all the big beats, you know, big emotional arcs, big characters, just craziness. He just goes crazy with that stuff. So that's kind of what I think about with his writing these days. And I love it. Like I totally dig it. Like it scratches that itch for me. If I'm looking for like smaller scale slice of life stuff, there's a lot of other authors out there I can go to. But with Scott stuff, it's like,
Hmm.
big summer blockbuster. Give me that.
Well said. Well said. And I like the word. I like that you highlighted. He excels in like these epic kind of sagas. Because I think about the heavy metal stuff that he was doing and how much, how much that, how far that reached. Not only in like issue numbers. Hell, I think he did like two different series, like heavy metal and dark metal, if I'm not mistaken. But that touched like a little bit of everything, and it always seemed like he had a plan for all of it. Like he was he was the mastermind behind it. And to your point, like he also really good at just writing unabashedly like fun comic books. Like he just gets superheroes and what makes them fun, and it's just he just goes balls to the wall with it, and you could tell like he's having
Totally.
a lot of fun. So well said,
100%.
Travis. Same,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, Travis. Same question to you. What words come to mind when you think of Scott as a teacher and a writer?
Um, I mean, generous is the go-to for sure for his teaching. I can't really come up with a better word than that. But knowledgeable. He's really smart as a teacher. He's one of those teachers that really engages with the students, but he also kind of is very organized, and that I think is really impressive to, like Ben was saying, this guy's got like 3 jobs, 3 kids, and
Hmm.
a lot of stuff going on. So it's awesome. And he gives us a peek into his process. I mean, some of the stuff that he taught us, I can see in his writing, and it makes reading even his books, a more fun process because you can kind of like notice like the his own tricks as he uses them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Noctera, I get that. I've I get it every month. We Are Demons, or We Have Demons. I forget what it's called, but I love that comic too. I'm just like really kind of impressed by his like work ethic, but also just kind of as like a hero, kind of you look up to him as a writer. He's just he didn't even start that early. He was writing prose, and then he was teaching, and then he got into comics, and
Hmm.
that's kind of what I want to do.
Well
So.
said. Well said. All right, let's go ahead and shift over and talk. Let's go ahead and shift gears and talk about the actual anthology that came out of the class. And it sounds like from my understanding, and Ben, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was the class was 1,000 people viewing and tuning in. There was it sounded like a splinter group that kind of splintered off. you guys formed your own Discord, and among that, whatever the 20 artists that are currently on this Tales from the Cloakroom, that's where that came from, right? From the larger 1,000, 20 of you guys branched off, decided to do your own anthology, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We all organized and came from the first Discord, the class, and we definitely put out a call for submissions and interest early in the class,
Okay.
right? So it wasn't like only the 20 people and nobody else was allowed to jump into it if they wanted to. So we put out a call early, like August, September. And we tried to keep the window open as long as possible because we knew there were like stragglers and late people signing up for the
Sure.
class. But we did have to close the window at one point. But yeah, we formed our own Discord so that we can keep everything organized,
Makes sense.
so that we'd have our own separate channels. We had like channels for like editors and resources and things like that. But yeah, it spun
Okay.
off from the original class, and yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. That makes sense, right? Like you gotta at some point you gotta stop talking about it and just do it, and that's where deadlines come into play, and it keeps the project going and on track. So that's good. But so Tales from the Cloakroom, it's impressive. You sent me an advanced copy to read over. I got through about half of it. Of course, I read both you and Travis's story. Good stuff. I also want to highlight two of the other stories that really caught my attention. One was called titled "Enough" written by Shay Nevo. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. I apologize if not. It was illustrated by Lane Lloyd, and then another story called Nogalvi, by Evel Hand and art by Stan Yak, which was super excellent, super excellent. So, I mean, the anthology alone, it looks good. It's impressive. The thing that really caught my attention, though, I'm sorry, the thing that really caught my attention is the scope of comics, right? So, it's advertised as a 120-page multi-genre anthology. It's got 20 short stories. And then there's a commitment, right, to uplift emerging voices in underrepresented communities. I think the stats said something like 50% of the creators are women, BIPOC, and or people with disabilities, among other people. Sorry, among people from other communities. And I was curious, was that always a conscious part of the plan when the idea for the anthology came up, or did it just like naturally happen because you looked around and you're like, wow, we have a pretty diverse group that wants to make this anthology?
Do you want me to take that one,
I
Travis?
mean, I'll take
Yeah, go ahead.
you can take it. Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, man.
Well, so yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above. So when we first started, there was one person who, put in the original Discord like, "Hey, let's make some comics together and make an anthology." That was Joji Schuster. He's one of our editors.
Hmm.
He brought me in because I had some experience publishing indie short comics. And I'd had a lot of experience as a backer on Kickstarters. And then we brought two more editors onto the team, and when we put in the like call for interest, we very quickly saw that we were getting a fairly diverse group. So we wanted to
Cool.
keep that, as part of the sort of DNA of the project, right? We didn't want to lose that by somehow just bringing in like everybody from the same walk of life, the same background. So we were
Makes
very
sense.
encouraging of that. To have folks from different backgrounds, a lot of diversity, and we wanted to support all of those emerging voices too, right? Like that was very important to us. So yeah, that was sort of like our guiding light from the very beginning, and I think we did a really good job of like keeping that all the way to the end.
Fantastic. And was this something that like was the Tales from the Cloakroom, was the anthology something that Scott Snyder was like gave two thumbs up with? Did you guys have to run it by him? Like what was it like pitching him or telling him the idea? Or was it just kind of like, look, we're just gonna do it and then, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Ben, you can answer that.
yeah. So great question. So initially, when we first organized it, the first couple months, it was purely the students bootstrapping it, and we had not at that
Cool.
point had any kind of conversation with Scott or with his editor. But once it got really serious and it was off the ground, then we were like, hey, we need to engage with Scott's team and make sure that he's cool with this, and then to see if there's any resources or any kind of editorial help they can offer. So we worked through Tyler as
Hmm.
editor, and one of the asks that we got early on was to use his name, right? Which was amazing. So he was like, I'll lend my name to the book. You can use it in your marketing. Obviously, that helps with things like SEO. So that was a huge get for us. But the rest of the book, as far as like making it and budget and all that stuff, it was 100% bootstrapped. So we're not part of Best
Hmm.
Jacket Press or anything like that. Um, the other consideration that we got from Scott and his team was the premium reward that we have, which is a signed book, right? An autograph book by Scott. That's our most expensive reward tier. So
Hmm.
they agreed to. He agreed to autograph 50 books, so limited quantity, and that was really awesome. And they've been very encouraging, and like just kind of uplifting us in social media and in his Substack newsletter also. Um, and that's been extremely helpful, right? Because he's got like 250,000 followers, so when he tweets something out, it gets to a pretty broad audience. So they've been very
That's
helpful
awesome.
that way. But for the most part, it's a true indie anthology. It's like been bootstrapped by the team.
That's cool. I can only imagine Scott Snyder having the same level of like just like proud, just being proud, like Morgan Freeman at the end of like Lean on Me, right? Or like all the kids have come together and they want to learn and things like that. But I can imagine like someone like him who clearly has a passion for teaching, would be proud of the fact that like this group decided to like, we're just going to do it. We're going to do it from the ground up. We're going to organize it. And, he didn't have to handhold or anything like that. And he got, I don't know, I would imagine like it's cool to see, like your students like put the things that they learn into effect, into practice. I'm sure that like, he was immensely proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak on that a little bit. Well, first, just to answer your earlier question, I think it's a testament to comic fandom, just in general, of how diverse it is, just in general, because a lot of Scott's fans just kind of joined the Discord and joined his class, and then, from all those people, it wasn't planned or anything, but we just ended up getting a really kind of awesome and diverse group of creators on
Hmm.
this comic. And he must love his fans. I went to a signing that he did at Midtown Comics like a few months ago because I love him, but also just because I thought it would be cool to meet him and Tyler and try to be like, hey, like I'm doing this anthology. So
Yeah.
I waited online for like an hour in front of the store. Obviously, this is one of the pluses to living in New York. You can do this kind of stuff. Um, and just the people in line were from all different walks of life. It was old people, young people, black, white, Asian. I mean, anybody was in that line.
Hmm.
And I'm sure it was kind of similar in our class. It was just kind of a whole bunch of different people, different skill levels as writers, as artists. We all just kind of came together. It's like, the ragtag group that we are. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well
And
said.
I think it'll show in the diversity of the stories, not only in um, the amount the people that wrote them, but also in the types of stories and the subject matter of the stories themselves.
Okay. That's good. So, Travis, I'm gonna stay on you because I like where you're going for this. Can you break down, because I mentioned earlier that, you are the director of photography on the DMX HBO Max documentary, which I've got queued up. Like I told you, I almost had to give up my hip hop card because I forgot that documentary came out, and that was something I was looking forward to, especially since we lost him, last year. I've just kind of had X on my mind a lot lately, so I'm gonna watch that documentary. But I wanted to know, how did you apply, the principles that you learned from Scott's class, and also, doing film, into your story in the anthology.
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of is part of my origin story for just creating comics and just comic books in general. I didn't really work a lot during the pandemic because I'm a cinematographer, and that involves going places and being around people and
Yeah.
can't really do that during a pandemic. So I was at home and I was, thinking a lot and trying to kind of figure out what I could do with my creative energy and, um, with my unemployment money. So, I did a little short comic, uh, just kind of, it's not great, but it's a little short comic that I did. I hired an artist, that I found on Reddit and kind of just like started doing it that way. And this was 2020. And yeah, I definitely was able to apply a lot of the things I've learned making films over the years. As a cinematographer, you literally, are making these kind of frames as
Hmm.
you go through a film. So it's kind of like panels in a comic book. And you learn simple things like rule of thirds and like, oh, you don't want too much dialogue happening on a close up for too long. It's like similar kind of tricks that you learn in film, you can apply to comics. I mean, it's totally different, but you can really apply a lot of kind of the simple things to comics. I would also say in comics, what one of the great things is it's a lot cheaper to make. You only have an artist to pay if you're a writer, or if you do both, you just do it all. So it's a lot cheaper to make, um, and you can make crazy sci-fi stories and out there ideas accessible in a way that you could never do that in film.
Hmm.
And that's always been one of my favorite things about comics. Reading them over the years has just been how out of the box you could get. So
Yeah.
I took the opportunity to start writing these sci-fi and horror comics because I couldn't make those as films.
Yeah. I think I've gone on, on the show we've talked about how sometimes a really good, like, especially like illustrator that's got a good writer, or a writer that happens to know how to also like illustrate and draw, like a really a master at the comic book craft, you know is almost, not only making a comic book, but it can also be looked at as kind of like a storyboard, right? Like, not only just the similarities on the form factor of, like, yeah, you're drawing boxes and panels and it being told in a sequence, but I think about like comic book movies that are adaptations of like original comic books, and how sometimes you know they're telling a scene or a action or something going on like beat for beat, and it's like, man, how much easier is it to just look at a comic book and be like, oh, we've got our story. They literally drew us a storyboard. They provide us the dialogue. We just have to shoot it, and then think about the actors and production, all of that. Like, am I accurate in that? Like a comic book script, hell, not just a script, but a comic book and a screenplay or a storyboard are very similar.
Yeah, yeah, they are very similar, and I would even go further and to say that some of probably the listeners' favorite movies um, had some of their design and art direction done by very iconic comic book creators, such as
Hmm.
Mobius
Yeah.
or
Yep.
such like Star
Tarkovsky.
Wars, Ralph McQuarrie. I mean, some of these men and women that did do a lot of the storyboards and a lot of the art direction and stuff like that, I feel like don't get enough credit. You know, it's pretty incredible what Mobius did for Alien and
Dune and stuff.
Fifth Element and Dune and what not Ralph McQuarrie did for Star Wars and
Yeah.
H.R. Geiger and all of these people that know them as artists and the directors, George Lucas, whatever, but they're these people that are very instrumental in making a film the way it looks, and those a lot of them have come out of comics.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you, Travis. Ben, I'm gonna go back to you, and I want to ask. We've interviewed our fair share of writers, artists, colorists. We've had letterers on the show. But we've always had a and we've had a very small few of like editors, and that's always a role that I'm very interested in, coming from like the project management side of the world, and using that kind of brain, and people management and blah blah blah. But I want to hear in your words, can you break down exactly like what a comic editor does, specifically like what you're responsible for when it comes to an anthology like this one, where it's 120 pages, 20 different writers and creative teams, and multiple stories.
Yeah, sure. So, um, like you said, much of editing is project management. I actually have a bit of a project management background in my professional life from years ago. But as far as editorial duties on the anthology, it ran the gamut. So it was everything, right? So it was everything from getting the book off the ground, and that just wasn't me. That was the whole editorial team, organizing it, setting deadlines, moving all of the writers through the process of, like we have a deadline in 2 months, like scripts are due. So we set all of those sort of milestones. We did everything. So we reviewed scripts. The editors reviewed scripts. We gave feedback. Went as far as leaving line edits, like literally in Google Documents, leaving comments, even trying to fix like grammatical issues. So nitty gritty stuff, big picture stuff. And then, after all of the scripts and the art was turned in, and also to back up one step. So like a lot of the writers in the group, they hadn't ever made a comic before, right? So we had to put together all the resources to help those writers like bootstrap themselves and get off the ground and find artists, like even as something as simple as like finding a line artist. So from there, once the book is moving and we had all the scripts done, we had all the art done, then the editorial team basically turned into like a mini publishing company, like I was saying earlier, and at that point you're doing everything from like vetting out printing services to coming up with a fulfillment solution and putting together a marketing plan. So now we're basically talking about like a business. You're just running a business at this point. And then, when you get to the Kickstarter, like you have to understand like how Kickstarter works. There's a whole community there and they have their own sort of like etiquette. So we had to like learn all of those things. And this is all School of Hard Knocks, right? Like none of us had really done any of this before. And then, we do stuff on the social side of things too. Like we have hangouts, like for the writers, like once a month or so. So we just get together and we'll do like comic nerd trivia and, drink a glass of wine or whatever beverage of your choice is and just hang out. So we like organize those types of things. Yeah, to keep everybody engaged. So, yeah, we did a little bit of everything, like I think of it more as like kind of like a project lead and not just an editor. Like we wore so many different hats during the last year. It's probably more than like a regular professional comic editor does, I assume. So yeah.
And as part of like the editorial team, how did you guys go about approaching like curating the stories in the anthology, especially like when you consider, like I said, you're juggling more than 20 different writers working on stories of different tones and genres. Like I know the Tales from the Cloakroom, like the prompt for all the writers was, the prompt was, I believe, like about a jacket, right? Like a jacket was the prompt in homage or in honor of Scott Snyder's independent studio Best Jacket Press. But like, how did y'all go about like curating and putting the actual comics in order and things like that? Was it like a tone or a feel you were going for?
Yeah. So first of all, like we read a lot of the submissions and the scripts and the stories. We did unfortunately have to turn some away, so it was a little bit of a competitive process. One of our first sort of like rules and asks was it had to be publication quality, professional quality work from top to bottom. So the story and the art, lettering, everything, it had to be professional quality. Couldn't be amateurish. So we did have to turn some stories away because it didn't meet that criteria. And the reason was because we were using Scott's name. His name was attached to it. So we wanted to make sure that the finished product was going to be like pro quality stuff. And that was really important to us. But we wanted to be multi-genre, so you can have any type of story you wanted: slice of life, sci-fi, adventure, historical fantasy, horror. We have some horror stories. We have Western. We wanted to run the gamut, and that goes back to the diversity discussion earlier. We wanted whatever your whatever story was moving you at the time, we wanted that to be part of the book, and we didn't want to pigeonhole it as just a sci-fi or just a horror anthology. And that speaks to the diversity of the voices in the class, right? There's people from all walks of life, people who are interested in like romance or commercial comics like a DC comic, and people who just want to write slice of life. There's folks who want to do just sci-fi. So, we wanted to capture that sort of diversity from the class itself. So there was no like restrictions on that. One of the rules we had, it had to be 6 pages or less. So you couldn't turn in a 10-page story. We would turn that away. That was a big challenge for a lot of writers, because most people aren't used to self-editing and condensing story down to just like a core 6 pages or less, including for myself, right? I thought that was really difficult. So those are sort of like our guiding principles. Multi-genre, like we've got stuff from everything. And, hopefully it ties together. We had one of the editors on the team. She's the one who put the stories in order in the book. I don't know what her exact process was for like picking the order, but, I'm sure there's sort of like a story flow, like an emotional flow, maybe from going from one to the other. We had some stories that were black and white art only. So, we kind of wanted to break that up a little bit and mix in black and white and color, so those were some of the things that guided the book as well.
I thought, once you realize like the prompt was, like I said, a nod to Scott Snyder's best jacket press studio, and everyone involved with the anthology was prompted to craft a story with a jacket as the main prompt. I thought that was a very interesting take. Like, it kind of ties it all in. Like, we're the class, we're a class that learned from Scott Snyder. We're paying homage to him. His name's on it. And just like the different stories that you could tell with that as a prompt, which is, let's be real, it's like that is a very interesting prompt to work for. Like, hey, tell me this, write your own comic, 6 pages. Here's all of these requirements that you already kind of have to wrap your head around. But also the prompt is based around a jacket. It definitely had the wheels turning in my head, and it was, it was cool to see the different takes and approaches to that prompt, and where some of that left. And it was like when I read your story, Ben, which is titled "The Cold Dark Secret of Titan Station" in the anthology. I was more immersed into the world and the vibe that you kind of created. It's a very kind of like, you're not really sure what's going on. It's kind of got like that horror element to it. I had to go back to it and realize, like, all right, where did the jacket come into play? So it's kind of cool to find, like, like see how everyone approached that, and whether it was subtle or very like obvious. I think it kind of keeps you on your toes, and it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. So the jacket, we said that you could make it a major plot driver if you wanted, or you could have it be more of an Easter
Mm-hmm.
egg. We didn't want to hamstring any stories because a creator couldn't think of something to do with a jacket. Like, we didn't
Sure.
want to have that problem. So, we left it as flexible as possible. I don't know, Travis, how did you handle the jacket? I'd be interested to actually hear your take.
Yeah, totally. Well, I had a line in my story that had the word jacket in it in the beginning, and I was having a really hard time with the line. It was the line that the editors kept coming back to me and was like, "Yeah, this one's just not quite working." And the editing team was really great, and did a really good job, and were really helpful line editing my script. But I was having a hard time with this jacket thing, and it was starting to be somewhat of a pain. And then Aubrey was like, "Oh yeah, just you don't need the word jacket in it. Just wearing a jacket, you'll get the idea." So it ended up being that I cut the line. The character in my story is wearing a jacket, and that's about it.
Easy peasy. I like it. So like I was saying, you guys have reached the goal. You know, the books. Well, I'm sorry. Let me take a step back. So you guys have reached your goal. The artists and writers have already been paid, which is awesome to hear, right? Like the fact that their payment wasn't beholden to the book success. Like the fact that you guys got out the way, everyone got paid, which is great to hear. You know, you always want to hear creators and artists and writers get their just due. So I know the Kickstarter was primarily for everything else, like really like the hard part, right? Like the production, actually getting it printed and people into people's hands and whatnot. You guys have met the goal. There's 3 days left on the Kickstarter by the time this episode comes out. Like, what's next? Like, what happens once the Kickstarter is done? Have you guys talked about next steps and what the future is looking like? Ben, if you want to take that.
Yeah, so we'll obviously we have to wait 2 weeks to get the funds from Kickstarter. That's just how long it takes. Then we'll put the print order in with Mixam. That's our printing company, and we'll print it. It'll get shipped to an editor's house, and then we'll start on the fulfillment part. And so obviously that's going to be a couple of weeks process to get the books out to everybody, and then we also have to put together or send everybody the digital versions for our digital backers. We have goodies, so there's prints, bookmarks, and stickers. We have to put that order in with a separate printing company. That's with Comics Wellspring, and get all of those elements together in the same place so we can assemble everything. We got to send a box of books to Scott himself so that he can sign them, and then that gets sent back. So yeah, a lot of moving parts there. All of that stuff will last a couple of weeks, couple of months, which is sort of like a normal post-campaign, Kickstarter element. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the stretch goals that we have for the campaign, it actually pays the students back. So all of the students, myself and Travis, Travis, I'm assuming, we fronted the money to make the comics, right? Whatever deal you cut with your art team. And so the stretch goals actually pays a page rate to us, to the students. So each stretch goal increases it. So at some point, like, we'll get paid back. It might not be 100%, but it helps to defray the cost of making these awesome comics. Sure. So that's like one piece of the puzzle. And then once all of this is done, like for me personally, I want to get hard copies in local shops in Orlando. And anywhere else I can get them, just sort of like get the name out there. I know we have some creators that are pretty enthusiastic about going to cons and tabling. Like, we've already had people that table, so they'll they'll get copies of the book and they'll add it to their table for the future. And then, from there, I'm not sure. I know that there's another anthology group. Travis, I don't know if you had heard this, but there's a second anthology group that's organizing for class round 2. And
That's great.
Yeah, I was just about to ask if this is going to be like a recurring thing, because I think that would be cool for like every year an anthology came out, and if it was done by whether it be the same group or honestly just different group, like the different classes that come in and are willing to put in that work or whatnot. I think that's such a cool concept, and that'd be an awesome tradition to like create and carry on.
Yeah, so it's completely different splinter group, which is kind of amazing that they self-organize. And
cool.
I did a Zoom call with them for like a consultation, and gave them sort of like our playbook.
Yeah.
And I wish them the best of luck. I want them I want to submit to the book. I don't want to be an editor on it. It's a ton of work, like I want to be a writer. Yeah. But I'm happy to do Zoom calls with them and consult on like what we did and give them the playbook. But yeah, like same thing. I want to see the tradition go every year. Tales from the Cloakroom Volume 2, Volume 3 into infinity. I want to see future students do the same thing where they kind of bootstrap it and they learn how to make comics, like just from doing it, like nuts and bolts, like starting from zero. Where do I find a script template? How do I write a script? Start from there. A year later, you have a published book that's out in the world. Like, that's a beautiful education that you can get. So, I want that to keep going every year.
Damn, they came to you, Ben, like the senior. You're the graduating senior, and you got all the freshmen in orientation. Like, you're the senior that that high schools bring in to freshman orientation, and you're like, look, guys, it's 4 years. keep your head low, do your work, and you could be a success like me. That's awesome,
Yeah.
man. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
He's the head of the yearbook committee.
Travis, that is well said. That is what this is. Ben is he is the high school senior that has ran the yearbook committee for like the last year. He's done with it. He's done with it. Look, I want my picture in the yearbook now. Okay, that's what I want to worry about. I got it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm
That's
super happy to hear about the other people in the class, and that's just it's awesome. I can't wait to read that one too.
Me neither.
that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, Joe and I are actually in their Discord, so I'm sort of watching them from afar self-organize, and it looks like they're assembling a really good leadership team. I'm quite excited to see where they take this, and they have more time to do this than we did. We didn't start really getting the thing off
Hmm,
the ground until September, and they started organizing in June, so they got a couple months head start. And if they have any
nice.
questions, like I'm happy to answer. I'm not gonna like ghost on them or anything.
Hell yeah. Travis, I'm gonna go to you and kind of take the conversation in a different in a different area, away from Tales from the Cloakroom, away from Snyder's class, and it's something that me and you had briefly chatted about before Ben got on the call, but it's been on my mind since we brought it up, and I think our listeners, I know quite a few that would appreciate this question here, but I'm gonna go back to this DMX documentary, and I just have one question, and I wanted you to expand on something that you said in regards to following DMX for, whatever it would sound like a year. You had been following him for a year, filming this documentary. And, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of intimate moments, whether those be like good, bad, and different. And let's be real, like this was like X after he got out of jail. He had been there for what, a year? I mean, overall, DMX has had a very interesting life, to say the very least, a very troubled, a very hard life is what I'll say. But you had brought up, it almost sounded like you were going to compare or talk about the similarities between these superheroes that we read in comic books and celebrities, and what you kind of got out of that experience and how that related. Do you mind kind of like do you mind actually addressing that or sharing that with us?
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, as you said, I spent a year with DMX. I picked him up from jail, and then I basically was documenting him um, until the end of his life. And obviously it was very tragic at the end. But yeah, celebrities are interesting people, and I would say that in the world that we live in, that's probably the closest thing you get to being a superhero.
Hmm.
And you have to see these people as humans, but they also have this awareness about them, especially DMX, who knows so many people looked up to him. He wanted people, I think, to learn from him, both his successes and his mistakes. And I think, he knew maybe not that he was going to die, but he knew that his life story wasn't the happiest story, and he
Hmm.
kind of made it a mission of uh, his kind of superhero goal, I guess, was to teach people kind of what not to do and to learn from his mistakes and to kind of be this almost prophetic kind of person that wasn't always the nicest person, but he was aware of his flaws, and he was aware that he was just a mortal being, and that he was aware that people did look up to him, and that at least he could impart on people through his music and through just being in the same room with them something that they could take when they left the room or stopped listening to his song, or whatever it was. He was somewhat of a selfless person. I wouldn't call him a superman, but he he would always pray before his set. He was very religious, but he was conflicted. He had a lot of inner demons,
Hmm.
and um, probably more of like a Batman type. Honestly,
He,
he had
he's
a
got
rough
the
childhood.
he's got the voice down to a fault.
He had a rough childhood. You know, he achieved success, but it didn't bring him happiness. You know, And I saw him laugh, I saw him cry, I saw him, try to overcome addiction. And his kryptonite eventually got to him,
Hmm.
and it's just really, it's really sad. But I think if you do watch this film, any of the listeners, you will definitely learn something from him. And I learned a lot from him, and I'm really sad that he's gone. And that'll always be one of the most memorable years of my life, for sure. Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing those words, Travis. Thank you. Like seriously, thank you. And definitely rest in peace to X. As a big fan of his, I know that took this conversation a completely different way, but I know I'd be remiss if I hadn't asked that and got to hear that. So thank you so much, Travis.
Yeah,
Ben,
I mean, in a weird way, filmmaking, you get this, a lot of rappers are into comics, it's
oh
like
yeah, oh yeah.
it's bigger than life, it's a bigger than life thing, and so are comics. So,
Look, as a
MF Doom, I mean, you could see a lot of similarities between, the this persona that you create on the page as a hero and this persona you create as a rapper or as a musician or as a actor or whatever it is.
oh yeah, look at like just half of the Wu Tang Clan, and then you'll definitely see that correlation and relationship between hip hop and comics. So, well said, Travis. Thank you. Ben, I'm gonna go to
Thank you.
you. I'm gonna go to you with this question as we start getting ready to wrap up. I do have a very important question that I like to ask at the end of the show, and that's in consideration to the listeners that tune in, especially the aspiring comic creators that tune into the show, especially when we have, um, you know, uh, great guests like you guys to talk about the actual comic making process. I'm gonna switch up my normal question. Um, um, I'm gonna switch up my normal question just because I want to hear. I want to leave with one more note about being taught comics from Scott Snyder and attending that class and your experience going through that, and that is I want to hear what is the most. I'm sorry. I want to ask what is the most impactful lesson or piece of knowledge that you left that class with? Like, how did that change the way you view or consume comics?
Yeah, great question. So there's a definite answer to this, I think. And Scott, from his very first class, first couple minutes, he's huge on the emotional storytelling and building an emotional arc first and foremost, and then plot second, right? So his emotional plotting, emotional storytelling is always first. I had never heard that before on any kind of like writing class. I actually have a background in writing. I took creative writing in graduate school at UCF. Um, and so I'd had a number of professors, and they never talked about storytelling in that way where you want to have an emotional movement and emotional growth in all of your stories, and then it doesn't really matter what the plot is. You can come up with a plot later and map it to that storytelling afterwards. For me, it's always been plot forward, right? Like characters do ABC all the way to Z, and then you drop in like a little characterization here, a little emotional nuance there, and then boom, you're done. So that was really like mind blowing for me when Scott talked about that. That was the number one takeaway I have, and he had a million examples of that in his class. I'll share one quick example. In one of the classes, he talked about the movie Titanic, James Cameron film, and he said that you can take that story, take them off of the boat, and put them on land or in any situation. And if you just have the emotional story being told, it's still a really good story, right? It's basically like a Romeo and Juliet tragedy. But because you've mapped the Titanic story to their emotional movement, that enhances everything, right? It amps everything up to 100, and that's why it's so successful. And so when he told that, I was really like, wow, that's like really interesting. Like he's really right about that. Like that's
Hmm.
the most important component. So that was the biggest takeaway for me, and that's the biggest switch that I've tried to make in my future stories is what's the emotional movement, what am I trying to convey to the readers emotionally, and then I'll figure out the plot, you know, second.
Fantastic. That's some good insight. Very good insight. Travis, I'm gonna go. I'm sorry, Travis, I'm gonna go to you. Same question. What do you think is the most? What would you say is the most impactful lesson that you got out of Scott Snyder's class, and did it change the way you view or consume comics in any way?
Um, well, I was going to probably have a similar answer to Ben because that like pearl of wisdom that he gave about three act structure, and that three act structure is not actually about what happens, but it's the journey that the character takes, and what their arc is. And I thought that that was just, so simple but so genius. I think a lot of times in these classes, writing classes, we're taught about, the hero's journey and things like that. But a lot of times those stories are kind of somewhat more plot driven. The basis of a hero's journey is somewhat of a, known structure to people that have taken writing classes. But to take that to the next level and to see that the hero's journey is their own journey mentally as well as physically, I thought was great. Also, the bit I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, about collaboration, his class that he did with Greg Capullo was really great. Not necessarily the content that we learned as much as just kind of learning about how an artist works with a writer, and that it's not always all amazing and a perfect relationship at the beginning, and that you have to kind of learn your collaborator's strengths and weaknesses, and learn how to kind of elevate the strengths of your collaborators and maybe kind of fill in for their weaknesses. Scott talked about how his first scripts to Greg Capullo were these kind of novel length, kind of just endless prose describing all the panels, just like, on the top left, and then you're going to go all the way down to the bottom. And, Greg didn't want to work like that. He didn't like working like that. He was, already a really experienced artist. And over the next couple issues, I think that they kind of started to really hit a groove when they were doing the Batman run. So, just learning those kind of things were really great. And just, obviously, like I said before, Scott having all these incredible guests also was awesome.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because you have somebody like Will Dennis who did the editing on Hunter Bullets, which is one of my favorite comics, just talking about how to pitch it, just so awesome. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Gentlemen, I appreciate you guys sharing, these gems and what you've learned. I know, like, I'm encouraged to really look into Scott Snyder's class, but also to to promote and check out Tales from the Cloakroom when it officially comes out. I'm gonna have links to both of your your handles, whether it be Instagram or Twitter, in the show notes, so people can check out what you guys got going on and give you a follow specifically. But I wanted to let you guys give one more shout out and tell the people where they can support Tales from the Cloakroom and what happens next. Ben, if you want to go ahead and take that.
Yeah, sure. So you can find us on Twitter at Cloakroom Comics. You can see that on my name right there. And you can find us on Kickstarter. We have a vanity URL, so it's talesfromthecloakroom.com. That'll take you right to our Kickstarter.
Awesome.
But if you just Google Scott Snyder Kickstarter, it'll pop right up. We're 6 days left in the campaign. Please support us if you could. We want to hit that Let's Stretch goal so we can increase the creator page rate, help defray some of the costs of making these comics. And then after that, we'll do printing and fulfillment, and then, the project will wrap up. We're getting very, very close to the end. Just a few more days.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Travis, you got any closing words for us?
I just want to thank everybody for supporting our Kickstarter, and I really think you'll like at least 10 of the stories, and there are 20 of them. So
Yeah, look,
yeah,
that's a very high mark. Look, if out of 20, if you like half of it, I think it's well worth the money that you guys are asking for. And you know, at this
No,
point,
they're all really
nah,
great,
yeah,
and
no,
they're all really great, and yeah, just thanks for having us on the show. I really appreciate it.
no, dude, of course, and I co-sign. I think people will like more than just 10 stories. It's some it's some good comics for the price that you're paying. I mean, anthologies are fun in that regard, right? Like you just get a different flavor every single story, and you guys have done a fantastic job in assembling a very diverse, a very unique a group of writers. And it's you know it's all the more encouraging when you read the book and you realize, wow, these guys are, you know, this is them taking what they've just learned from a master comic storyteller and applying it and actually, you know, putting that into practice. Like, you can't help but like applause and commend you guys for what you have done. So, best of luck with the stretch goals. Best of luck with the release, and you know, continue making comics, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes out. Hopefully, you know, like I said, some future Tales from the Cloakroom volumes. But with that being said, I just want to say thanks again, Ben. Thanks again, Travis, for coming on the show.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for having